Republican-led House of Representatives voted on Thursday to pass a resolution to remove Democratic Representative Ilhan Omar from the powerful House Foreign Affairs Committee. House Republicans have argued Omar should not serve on the committee in light of past statements she has made related to Israel. So can someone explain to us what is the criteria to have someone or remove them from the House Foreign Affairs Committee? Because if it's related to criticism of another country, many people criticized other countries, way more dangerous than Israel, by the way. Now, just to give you a bit of a background, Ilhan Omar, she's a Muslim Somali refugee. And she is a vocal critic of Israel, which is very normal. It's a country that has been committing atrocities for over 74 years now against Palestinians. Very normal to criticize that country. But if that's the reason, criticizing a foreign country because it's the Foreign Affairs Committee, then Republican Chris Smith severely criticized China previously against human rights violations, although it's a superpower. He also criticized South Korea, and he also even called on sanctions on Vietnam and China. Another Republican, Adam Kinzinger, who is also a member of the committee, he introduced a resolution to authorize the use of force by U.S. armed forces against Russia, another global superpower that has nuclear weapons. So if it's something to do with the interest of the US and the supposed risk, then these people are criticizing, harshly criticizing, and even calling on sanctions and committing sanctions against global superpowers that have nuclear weapons. Whereas Israel is a state, a very small state, that relies heavily on decision-making in America and relies heavily on U.S. foreign aid. So, where is the problem? If she was kicked out because she criticized Israel, then Chris Smith and Adam Kinzinger should also be kicked out because they criticize countries that are way more dangerous to the U.S. Than Israel. Ilhan Omar, from her end, said this following her ousting.
My leadership and voice will not be diminished if I am not on this committee for one term. My voice will get louder and stronger, and my leadership will be celebrated around the world as it has been.
Today's resolution, as it relates to Representative Omar, details 6 statements she made as a sitting member of Congress that under the totality of the circumstances disqualify her from serving on the Committee on Foreign Affairs.
Don't tell me this is about consistency. Don't tell me that this is about a condemnation of anti-Semitic remarks when you have a member of the Republican caucus who has talked about Jewish space lasers and an entire amount of tropes, and also elevated her to some of the highest committee assignments in this body. This is about targeting women of color in the United States of America. Don't tell me, because I didn't get a single apology when my life was threatened.
This institution is better because of her leadership, and the Foreign Affairs Committee benefits from her perspective. So let's talk about what's really happening. Republicans are waging a blatantly Islamophobic and racist attack on Congresswoman Omar. And I've said it before, I will say it again. The white supremacy happening is unbelievable. This is despicable.
We're not removing her from other committees. We just do not believe when it comes to foreign affairs, especially the responsibility of that position around the world with the comments that you make. She shouldn't serve there.
I mean, to be honest with you, this is just another example of just how complicit and supportive the supposedly biggest democracy in the world is with Israel's criminal regime. I mean, on the second most enlightened democracy, supposed democracy on the other hand, Britain, there are repeated attempts to silence anyone who says anything about Israel. Firstly, by weaponizing anti-Semitism, which is an anti-Semitic act on its own. So weaponizing anti-Semitism for political purposes is very anti-Semitic. And then threatening and intimidating anyone who dares to speak out against Israel. I mean, we had a massive smear campaign against Jeremy Corbyn, and everyone knows about that. And now it's continuing with anyone who even whispers anything about Israel, as if it's somehow beyond freedom of expression, beyond scrutiny, beyond accountability, let alone beyond a call for sanctions or for action against it, to stop its ever-increasing violence and human rights violations, occupation, regime of apartheid, and racial and religious supremacy. Now we had Kim Johnson, who called Israel a fascist state, taking her word back, basically, after pressure from the Labour Party. Israelis inside of Israel call Israeli governments fascist. Some of them even call them neo-Nazi. There is nothing new about that. There is nothing outstanding about that. And there's nothing that is so inaccurate about that at the end of the day. Any country that implements a regime of religious supremacy and ethnic supremacy, and Israel does clearly, blatantly, by the way, implement it, deserves the title a fascist state, or a radical state, or a radical regime, or a racist regime, something. I don't know what's wrong with that. And why should people be so intimidated and threatened just because they speak up in one word against Israel? You're actively engaging in an act of war against a global superpower and supporting the people they're fighting with weapons, with information, with money, and you're implementing sanctions on that superpower. And that, in return, is affecting the livelihoods of the normal person in the UK, in the rest of Europe, in other countries as well. You have prices hiking up, people barely scraping it because of the sanctions that you're implementing and the measures that Russians had to take back against the West. And yet that seems to be absolutely fine. And no one's being, spoken to or even challenged when it comes to these things publicly, because it seems like a complete no-no and some sort of a taboo. I mean, have people lost their minds? If it's about what's actually affecting people in the country that you live in, then that's affecting people way more than Israel. As a matter of fact, if you even implemented sanctions on Israel tomorrow, you would hardly feel anything in the UK or in the rest of Europe or in the US for that matter. Whereas you are facing consequences for implementing sanctions against Russia, and everything is fine because it's okay. I mean, what are you thinking exactly? And then you think, who's profiting from this? So you're giving this money to Ukrainians for free, so you're not getting anything back. But nothing is for free. That money is being taken out of the average people's pockets and is being brought back to companies like Lockheed Martin and other big corporations in the US and other weapon manufacturers, and it's feeding the military-industrial complex, and in the meantime increasing tensions. Where do you want to take us exactly? So this woman, she has a complete right to speak her mind, and it's absolutely vile and quite blatantly racist to ban this woman from serving in the Foreign Affairs Committee simply because of specific views and because of her color and because of her background. And that's it for today, guys. Hopefully I'll see you soon in another episode.